Okay, so here we go. So once again, welcome to our Cosmetology PLC webinar. Today we're going to be discussing CTE math, talking about ways that math can be incorporated into the curriculum and opportunities to sort of bridge the gap between technical math and academic math. Before we get started, just a reminder about audio. You have two options during the webinar for audio so that you're able to hear us and we can hear you. One is you're calling in via telephone, and if you choose to do this, please make sure to enter the PIN code, which is available in the audio section of your right-hand toolbar. That's what will enable you to mute and unmute yourself, and also to have some options, some additional options for your voice and speaking. Second option, of course, is computer, and you're able to talk through your computer microphone and listen with your speakers, and that works fine as well. Right now, everyone is on mute, and that's just for background noise purposes, but we are hoping to have some discussion points today, and when we get to those points, we'll certainly do our best to unmute everybody and give you an opportunity to talk with each other. Also, if you are sharing a computer connection with a colleague, please send us a note in the chat box so that we can make sure to give everyone proper credit for participating today. As you may know, you could probably only enter one name when you sign in, but if you are sharing a connection, we ask that you let us know about that. And also, while the presentation is going on today, if you have a question or a comment, please feel free to raise your hand. You can do that by clicking on the hand icon on your control panel. That's the hand that looks sort of like a high five sign. And you could also type in your question or comment into that questions box. So we welcome those as we go, and we'll be monitoring those and responding to them as we can. Also, just one additional housekeeping note. For those of you who might be interested in earning Act 48 credits for your participation in the webinars, we did receive word from the Bureau of CTE that Act 48 credits are available to be earned. In order to receive them or to apply for them, you would need to participate on a minimum of 3 webinars for your cosmetology group and complete and submit a PLC webinar response form to us within 5 school days of the webinar. For some of you who participated last year, this is the same process. I will be sending out that response form to you via email so that you'll have that. I just wanted to let you know up front so that you can be listening attentively and making notes about what you might want to respond with for that webinar form. So we'll be keeping track of attendance and participation in those forms over the course of the year. And at the end of our PLCs, if you would like to pursue Act 48 credit, you can request a report from us that will indicate your hours and participation, and you can then submit that to your school for that to be forwarded on to PDE. This is just an example of what the webinar response form looked like from last year. It will be pretty similar to this year, slightly different, but essentially asking for your feedback and comments and questions for further discussion. So we do review these, and it is helpful for our planning purposes, both for future webinars and for future PLCs. So we do value your input and your ideas. So just to refresh our collective memories about our learning goals for this year's PLCs as they pertain to math, our 2 primary goals are to discover and to discuss the 8 practices of the Common Core State Standards for Mathematics, to become familiar with those and to discover ways to incorporate those into your curriculum. and then also to help you develop a comfort level and to strengthen your ability to contribute to your local CTC's numeracy planning and implementation efforts to help you become a leader in that effort. So in terms of our agenda today, we're going to start out with a discussion about where is math embedded in our curriculum, doing some brainstorming about opportunities to include math and where you are currently doing that. And then we're going to turn the presentation over to Kathleen McNally from SREV. She's been gracious enough to join us today. Many of you may have met Kathleen if you've attended the TAP math workshops. She's been presenting at those and leading the effort on helping strengthen and develop math in the CTCs. She's going to share with us a presentation, some background information, and a framework for us to consider as we go forward with incorporating math and trying to strengthen the math competencies. And then we'll hear from a couple of you all with some examples of lessons that you've shared, some ways that you're currently doing this in your classrooms. And then we'll wrap up with some ideas about resources, where to look for more information, and then next steps. So with that, I'm going to take just a quick pause, take a look at the questions box to see if anyone has any questions or comments at this point in time. If you do, please feel free to raise your hand or enter any information into the chat box, or the questions box rather. I did also forget to mention my colleague Tom Sudreth from Meter Consulting is online with us as well, and he is available to help troubleshoot if anyone's having audio issues. Tom, it looks like Stacy Rudy entered a note into the question box, so if perhaps you could respond to her and see if she's been able to resolve her, if she's able to hear us, I guess. I'd appreciate that. Okay. Well, with that, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Charles, is there any other? Sorry. With that, why don't we go ahead and jump into our discussion to get us started thinking about where are the areas that math intersects with cosmetology. And we asked all of you to think about this in preparation for today's session. I've listed a couple examples up here to get us started. But what I'm going to do is just flip out of presentation mode and get into note-taking mode so that we can hear from you and examples that you have of areas where in lessons where you use and address math content. So if you could please raise your hand and we'll unmute your microphone. Hopefully you've all had have a couple examples to share with us today. If you don't have audio, you're welcome to enter your responses into the question box. So we're looking for examples of skill-based lessons that include math and that where you've incorporated math into your curriculum. Anybody want to jump in? Let's see. It looks like Timothy Wilson. Tim, I'm going to try unmuting you. You want to test out your audio? Timothy Wilson, your microphone is unmuted. If you want to test that out. We don't hear you yet. All right. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like your microphone is working at this moment, so if you'd like to enter your example into the question box, that would be great. Looking at the question box, looks like we do have a couple examples coming in, and I'll just go ahead and read those. Michelle Allen from Career Institute of Technology indicates that they do bell ringers at the beginning of the session. They have short 5-minute worksheets, and Michelle actually shared a couple of those with us, and I'll be showing those to you a little bit later in today's session. But some great examples of quick worksheets that students can do while they come in, when they come into class, give the instructor time to take attendance, and then the problems can be reviewed in a short lesson or turned in to be graded. Many different ways to use those, so that's a great example. We also hear from Christine Franklin. Some examples that she uses are developing a business plan and developing a salon. And the math that is incorporated in those, some examples are determining square footage and figuring out costs. Great examples, both touching on the business math side of things as well as some geometry. Stacy Rudy writes that she uses geometry in teaching elevations for types of curls. And let's see, Mary Heim, hair color and converting fractions to money examples. So another good example there. Looks like Timothy Wilson has his hand up, so let's try the audio again. Timothy, are you able to talk with us? Okay, unfortunately it looks like still not quite connected on the audio side. Oh, but he did enter a note that they have students call each other on fake telephones and schedule appointments using phones. So that's a great example, sure. And then Melissa Chapman writes, developing menus and price lists for salons. So this is great. So, and we will capture, I'm not actually typing these in as we go, but I will capture all these on the PowerPoint presentation so that we'll have this as a reference point. So we'll get these all on the list so that we'll have this to refer back to. So another example from Maura Duncan, the senior students calculate their salary and commission in the student-run salon. So a real-life example of using math in a business setting and also for your personal finances. And then let's take one more example. This is from Kathleen Houghton. She's a math coach, and she says that her cosmetology instructor at her school uses a handout that shows elevations in hair cutting and shaping, also in describing facial structures and so forth. So that's great. What a rich list of examples and some great opportunities to talk about math and to bring it into the classroom. It's not always as obvious with cosmetology, I understand, as with some of the other trades. So it's great that you all are being very creative and thoughtful in introducing math and bringing it into your classrooms. Okay. Well, what I'd like to do at this point then is to turn over the microphone to Kathleen McNally. She has some information that she'd like to share with us and talk some more about the framework and sort of the big picture of embedding math and bringing math into your lessons. So I'm going to change over the presenter control to Kathleen and ask her to, oops, for some reason. Kathleen, is that changing over to you? Great. We see your slides now.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Desktop.
I know. Thanks for everyone's patience. It gets a little tricky sometimes switching back and forth.
Yeah.
I think we have.
Great with everybody. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be part of like a fly on the wall to listen to the talented cosmetologists across the state. I agree with you, Jennifer. I think the list that was coming in of all the areas that you can look at where math lives in cosmetology was very rich, very excited. So thank you so much. If I may, I wanted to spin off of their list a little bit before I went into the 7 elements. And just out of curiosity, I wanted to run this by you, and hopefully you can see that on the screen. This is a clip, this is a PDF from a marketing research PDF from Nails magazine that I was using recently that I thought was really interesting. When folks were mentioning this idea of the business aspect of the world of cosmetology and human service, they're absolutely right, dead on. Finances, 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 in terms of, you know, developing a business plan, salaries and commissions, you know, personal finances, all of that, generating price lists, etc. I also think that there's an opportunity, and I really encourage when I work with cosmetology teachers to think about this, because sometimes it's not the first thing that comes to mind, but the idea of marketing, research marketing for their students in terms of, I mean, because it's a cutthroat business out there. You folks certainly know that better than I do. But when we look at the Common Core for state standards for mathematics, and Pennsylvania has signed on to that, one of the areas in high school mathematics that's a large area that students have to be responsible in for high school is the idea of statistics and data analysis. And that's a very, I think, awesome opportunity for cosmetology students and nail technician students to really kind of exercise that through understanding their role or how it could be helpful for them to be market researchers. So I wanted to just kind of run through this real quick and see if ideas come to mind from our participants. So as I scroll down, this is and you may have used this or seen this before, but it's a really, I think, a neat, fairly current, it's 2011, 2012, collection of statistics, industry statistics. But what I think is nice about it is that it's packaged in a way that's, you know, kind of user-friendly. Cosmetologists are very good at that. They know the idea of marketing and packaging and what, you know, it's all the way from personal appearance all the way to the, you know, look of your salon. It's the same way with this. And I just thought, wow, there's so much interesting information in here, and it's a lot of data. And I think there's an opportunity to, there we go, for example, demographics, for our colleagues in your field to think about, now how could I incorporate or challenge my students to become market researchers? There's an interesting stat, for example, in here. The top 5 most effective marketing strategies for a salon. Word of mouth and client referral comes way up with 51%. Newspaper ads, for example, register at 7%. And this is very powerful information for, I think, students that eventually what we want to do is really prepare them for their career ladder, looking at where they're going to head in terms of being a business owner. And so mathematically, this could be very rich to kind of extend this idea. There's stats on the environment, booth rental, dress uniforms, etc. So I thought, Jennifer, if we had a moment, I'd be really interested and curious from the participant standpoint of like how you might see this working in their time with their students, this idea of being a market researcher, and what might be some ideas of like an extension on their project or maybe an at-home or on-the-side effort that they can do. Could we open that up for some ideas coming into the question box?
Sure. Certainly the question box, or why don't I'll take a gamble. I'll give this a try of unmuting everybody, and we'll just see if we can maybe have some discussion as well. And so working down the list, just unmuting everyone. If you are in a noisy environment or have other circumstances you might want to mute yourself, that's fine. Okay. Does anyone have a thought in response to Kathleen's question, how this information could be incorporated into any of your lessons or discussions with your students?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
This is Michelle Allen from CIT. I see this. We did a project with our professional development coordinator that the students did presentations. So you could kind of take parts of this information and have the students work together and do a presentation on, the statistics, giving the statistics to all the students and sharing it. They made posters and did a whole, it was a whole lesson, a whole big project with it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's definitely a relevant application. Getting a little bit of an echo, but we do have everyone unmuted. So does anyone else care to share an idea or a response?
Hi, this is Melissa Chapman. We've used these, I heard someone mention about the appointment scheduling. We try to pull the most current prices and most current services, and then we have appointment pages, and we list on the page what appointments they're expected to fit into that schedule for the day. And we use the prices so they can figure out salaries. And somebody mentioned something about doing clinics with salaries, something similar with that.
Okay, thank you. That's another great example. We had, let's see, Christine Franklin wrote in that she thinks the student could use this research as a starting point and do a project where they need to research the immediate area. For example, strip malls, private salons, and so forth, to determine how many stylists, type of salon, dress codes, etc. Talking about competition and thinking about developing their business plan and establishing their own salon. Another great example. Anyone else have a thought or a comment to share? Okay. Let's see. Melissa, did you have something? Melissa?
No, I already did.
Okay, nothing else. Okay,
Sorry.
Great. Well, we'll be sure to make this this report available on the PDE SAS website so that you can certainly look at it closer and make use of it if it's something that you think you might be able to incorporate into your curriculum. So that's really, I think just the layout and design of it is very catchy as well from a visual perspective.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Sure, we can. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone again just to reduce the noise, and please continue.
Or what they do now. I think that's terrific. I just feel like it's an under-tapped area in mathematics. It's just one we don't think about automatically right away, but the idea of data analysis, so really kind of challenging your students to become market researchers, like Christine has suggested as a starting point, and then using their immediate area. It gives them a really, I think, a really rich point of reference in terms of the career area that they're going into, is to say, wow, like to really kind of use their mathematics to really get out there and collect data or design instruments to collect data. And nowadays, if you think about it, like the screen that's up now, how do you do business online? I mean, it's such an information-driven world. And for your students, for our students, it's just critical that they can manage and use the information flow out there to their advantage, to become really savvy about how do I use the world of online tools, how do I use the data that's so much more readily available. I mean, it was only a few years ago that we didn't have that to our, to use, and now we do. So I think I loved Michelle's idea of having students make presentations, that she had done that. Absolutely. The Common Core State Standards for Math also suggests that we need to have students make their math thinking public. So not only do they demonstrate technical savvy, as your students do all the time with their live clients and their practical work and experience, we also need to make their math thinking public. And so how can we do that? We can do that by asking them to collect and analyze data, to show it graphically like this document does, maybe to prepare something like this document for as part of their salon plan or part of their business plan. So I really, really appreciate just an opportunity to kind of throw that out there for an idea. So and thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity. I will just quickly, if I may, on my messy desktop, to share with you from the national look, and some of you folks might be very familiar with this, and some may not, but this was research that was done, probably 8 or 9 years ago by now, and Pennsylvania was involved. This was national research conducted by the National Research Center for Career and Technical Education, and so it's a group that looked at conducting this research specifically for CTE teachers and CTE students. So they were looking at what is necessary in terms of practice to help students when we enhance mathematics. Like, what are some of the things we need to do? Now, this is talking about lessons, and I know that there were some suggestions made about kind of problems of the day, which is great. Those activities are always rich to sort of keep it in the forefront all the time. This is focused on a lesson and looking at those opportunities that you started us off with, anywhere from hair cutting angles to salaries and commissions to generating schedules. As we're doing those lessons, as we're conducting that teaching with students, here's what the research suggests. And I'm going to boil it down, if I may, because I think there are two really important things about this. So it's going to be kind of like the drive-through version of this. And then I welcome you in the question box, in the chat box, raise your hand at any point, and Jennifer, if you can watch for that, to see if you have some examples of how this lives when you address it. So this is about instructional practice. So some of them are very obvious, the first one being you introduce the lesson. I think this is very interesting that I've had some conversations with CTE teachers that say, well, when I'm doing a math enhanced lesson, I don't tell my students that it's math. I just don't even mention it until the end, which I think is really hilarious because I think they want to try to sort of hide the M word so that students aren't going to be like, I'm not a math student, I don't like it, I don't want to do it. And so you certainly use your professional judgment about that. This research is saying that you introduce the lesson and then you kind of mention that it's going to be math related. You don't necessarily have to do that, I think, for success. The second step is about assessing where students are mathematically. Because you and I both know that many, many students, even though they may come to you as an 11th grader or a senior, they may have big gaps in understanding about mathematics. Like, it's startling sometimes that students don't even know how to read a clock, for example, like a traditional clock versus a digital timepiece. So assessing the math awareness is important, and we're going to dig deeper with that in our next session. But I'd like to concentrate on the next couple steps. So the research says that you work through your embedded example. So for example, if you're doing a lesson on how to calculate your own salary and commission, you would work through that in the context of cosmetology. You would work through step 4, a related contextual example. So that, for example, might mean that you might look at salary and commission in a different sense than cosmetology, to try to show students that it's a transferability. It's not just in your world. It's in it can transfer, and students need that. This research is all about what happens in students' heads when we've compartmentalized their learning. So what we're trying to do is bridge to the world of math and have math bridge to the world of cosmetology. That's what it's all about, and these steps are looking at that. Step 5 is about showing the traditional math, and I'll show a quick example of that. The idea that you would work through a salary and commission problem, but then you would also show students how to do the math behind it. So how do you take a percentage of a number? How do you set up an equation to do that? This is where I think it's very helpful if you have an opportunity or access to a mathematics teacher colleague that you can back and forth on this. this is lots of outcomes from this research have shown across different states that CTE teachers have found that they really benefit from talking with math teachers and vice versa in this world. And then, of course, they demonstrate their understanding and there's a formal assessment. And this is suggesting that when we do and have math-related opportunities in the world of cosmetology, that we include the math in your tests, you include the math in your quizzes, you include the math in performances. So a student might be showing you their cut on their mannequin, but you want to include in there that they're going to speak the right terminology of the 0, the 45, the 180, if forgive me if that's not right, but if that's the way you talk about that, the angles of hair cutting. So one of the things I want to boil down, and then I want to open up the question box, so send me some examples if this resonates with you, is that one of the big learnings from this research happens in these middle steps, and that is the idea of bridging the gap between how cosmetology teachers talk about the technical situation that involves the math and how mathematics teachers would talk about the math. May not be the same. And we have found that students don't necessarily make or bridge the gap between the two. As an example, and forgive me if my cosmetology prowess is not on target, because anybody that's met me knows that's not my world. Looking at my hair and my nails. In fact, you folks have already sent me to the drugstore for stuff. So cosmetology, for example, you may talk about formulas and say you're going to need half a tube of 7G and a quarter tube of 7R. The mathematics behind that is the ratio of color, right? You're looking at, I believe, the mixing of formulas of color to hydrogen peroxide. From a mathematics teacher standpoint, they would talk ratios. They would use the idea of 2 to 1. So that would be a reference with the colon. That's how mathematics teachers talk about it. It may or may not be the way you show it. You may show it differently. You may talk about it orally. So the idea is that we want to get you folks partnered up with math colleagues or math resources that you can help students bridge the gap between the two. So here's a quick exercise that I've used when I work with TAP folks about this. And I welcome you to, in the question box, or raise your hand, of the 4 words that are on the screen, axis, solution, range, yard. I would love you to give us any definition of any of the 4 that comes to mind. How would you define any of those words that come to mind? Jennifer, can you see if anybody has a suggestion in the chat box?
I will be happy to. So please feel free to raise your hand or enter your responses into the question box. Looking for your initial ideas on definitions for any of these terms. Let's see. Okay, so we have a response: solution, answer to a problem. Thank you, Melissa, for kicking us off. Who else has an example or a definition? One of the most creative ones we heard on our session with the carpentry instructors was axes, something to chop down a tree. Okay, here's another example. A yard, 3 feet or 36 inches. Range, area from one point to another, from one point to another, area in between. Another definition for range, the difference between the smallest and largest numbers in a group. Also, starting and ending point. Any others? Referring to range on the pH scale. Solution.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, did not think about that. Terrific. Well, thank you. Thank you, and thanks, Jennifer, for sharing those, and thank you, folks, for jumping into that chat box. So, yeah, so the idea of showing the example, this is to make a point, and the point is to really be purposeful about bridging terminology. When we're talking about trying to help students mathematically, and the research shows that it did help, they did better on their mathematics assessments, they didn't lose any technical ground, which is good, is the idea behind this. So axis, solution, range, and yard, as you were pointing out, are all terms that have a specific definition in the world of mathematics. but they also all have other meanings outside of the world of mathematics. For example, you may talk about solutions in cosmetology as a mixture. Scientists use that in that way. Range, I've had folks that have talked about shooting ranges, that's their, that's kind of their point of reference in their personal life. And in West Virginia, that's how we get our dinner, so in the shooting range. Yard, something that you mow, as well as 3 feet. So folks they come from their own paradigms, and students do the same exact thing. And so what we need to do is we need to say, this is an opportunity for a solution. Like, what's the solution to your thinking when you look at your scheduling, or when you're calculating or the angle of a haircut? What's your solution to that? What's the range of what could possibly be the range of what you'd make on a commission from this to this? So that we're using mathematical language. On the flip side, we want to encourage math colleagues in your sending schools, or if you use the term, partner schools, that they could also tap the world of cosmetology. So that's one of the big, I think, one of the gems of understandings behind the 7 elements. The other piece, quickly, and then I would love to see if you have an example of this, is that the step that's highlighted on the screen, working through the traditional math examples. Oftentimes we will not take a moment, or we don't think about it, to take a moment that when we're working through your examples of where math is found in your world, is to actually also work through the math in a traditional way. Again, it helps to really be connected to a math person, and that might be a little, thinking, well, I'm scratching my head, well, I don't know how to go about that. But that's, part of the support that you need from your center, is that we need to connect you with your colleagues who share your students. At some point, your students have a math class, so they have a math teacher. So we want to look at how to bridge that. And the idea of showing traditional math I have on the screen. So for example, in the world of statistics and data analysis, here's a contextual example on the left. And this would typically have a table of data, but it's about a student's long-distance service charges and how much they're charged and what the timing of that is and so on and so forth. And then they would be encouraged to make some decisions around that, like what's the best plan for their charge. You folks would have very similar data. You could have similar data in scheduling. So that would be a contextual example. On the flip side, the traditional mathematics that would be involved in the contextual, it's the same mathematics, but the traditional view is what you see on the right. What is the median of the following scores? That's the way they will see a question in mathematics. And so the research shows that it's helpful for students to see both and experience both contextual and traditional. So I appreciate very much those opportunities that you've identified, and I think that one of the walkaways is to encourage you to think about, do I do that? Or could I do that? Could I be a little more purposeful about when I'm going through the math involved in that, to also to have students demonstrate for me the math in purely the math sense? So any opportunities or examples to share? I know Jennifer suggested that there were a few participants that are kind enough that are going to share some examples of lessons. Is that right? So I can turn it over to you folks.
Sure, please do. And I'll go ahead and show the, let's see, bear with us for one brief moment while we change this over. Let's see. Okay. There we go. Great. So what I'd like to do, just by way of refresher, and then also to get us to the samples that we have for today, is to give you a quick review on where we are posting these resources and information on the community page for our Cosmetology PLC, and then we'll look at a couple of specific examples that some of your colleagues have been nice enough to share with us. So right now what you see on your screen is the home page for the PDE SAS website, and I have logged into my account. So my next step is on the upper right-hand corner to click on Teacher Tools. Next, I'll click on My Communities, And you'll see I have some listed here because I've already joined several of our communities. If you have not yet joined the communities, there's information about how to do that in the PLC newsletter that we send out each month, as well as in some of our emails. So please check those, and if you are not able to find those, you can certainly get in touch with me and I'll walk you through it. So I'm going to click on the Cosmetology PLC, and that will take us to the homepage for the PLC group. So just a reminder that these groups are open to anyone with a PDE SAS login. So we welcome your colleagues and anyone who might be interested in viewing and sharing and contributing to this information. So please feel free to invite them to join as well. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the screen to the digital content repository, and this is where we are posting the webinar presentations as well as information and materials, sample lessons, and resources. I will click on the math integration resources, and you'll see there are quite a few listed here. Many of these were shared by participants in last year's PLC, so there's a good start. We would like to continue building out all these resources, and eventually at some point in the future these will probably get shifted over to another site where they can be sorted and indexed and whatnot. But for right now, this is our landing place for them, and where we'd like you to look when you're in search of some resources. So I'm going to start by looking at the examples, or the two bell ringers that were shared with us by Michelle Allen. And Michelle, I'm going to try to unmute you again. Hopefully your microphone is still working. Michelle, are you still online with us?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Thanks. So you shared two with us. You had a worksheet about counting back change, and then guided practice for math lesson. Do you have a preference which one we start with?
Let's do the counting back change. That's kind of...
Okay. So I'm going to click on this lesson, and there we go. So please go ahead and describe this to us. Tell us when and how you use this, and any feedback that you might get from your students.
Right. I think, well, we still, like I said earlier, we use this in the beginning of the session while we're taking attendance and getting things together, kind of as a warm-up, the students to get used to everything. Sorry.
It's okay.
To the main office again. If anyone has found keys,
and I don't know if you can hear me with the announcements going.
The main office. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So, well, one of the things that we found is students with math, they're always using their calculator, or they're just always rely on a cash register to tell them what the change is going to be. So we try to teach them ways to count back and not use a calculator or the register. I went to the dollar store and got play money, the dollar bills, little bills, and coins. And as you can see, they have different scenarios here on what the change is, how to figure out the percentage sales tax, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And they have to, put the change, like I give them that manipulative so they can use the coins and the bills and figuring out what their change is. And the first time they did it, they fought me tooth and nail that they didn't know how to do it. And each time we present it to them, it gets easier and easier and better and better. So that's how we use this type of worksheet. We have many different worksheets. This is a little more scenario based. We have some that's just if the bill, the purchase price is $8 and they give you $20, what's their change back? We go very simple as well. So.
Great. Thank you. Okay. And would you like me to show the other one as well then?
Sure, that's fine.
Actually. Okay. I love how you use the manipulative. You actually got the dollars and the change, and that I'm sure makes it feel more real, but also more fun, I would think. For them.
Yeah, it was more real, more fun, and they got it then. Without the change in front of them, they wanted to get a piece of paper out and figure it out, or their, their calculator, like I said. So it was, it was much better. This is the same type of idea that they have to pick services. I think the directions say 2 services and 1 retail product. They work with partners, one being the stylist, one being the client, and using the play money, they're going to collect, the proper amount and give change. So it's just another way of, they get to formulate what services they're going to have, what products they're going to have, and how to do the transaction. And this gets them ready for, clinic. And I try to explain to them it's good for any job. They could be working, how many of us have been to Walmart and they punch in the wrong number, and now they don't know what change to give back to you. And they start pulling out their cell phone or their calculator, and I've actually stood there at Walmart and trying to teach the people how to count back change. So I try to prepare them for anything, salon-based or, any job.
That's great. And do you have a salon at your school?
Yeah, we do clinic at our school as well. Unfortunately, but fortunately, we have a cash register. So sometimes I make them punch in the correct number and get the change back, and sometimes I have them do that on their own so that they have to, think it and count it back for the client. So.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks for sharing that. Does anyone have a question or a comment for Michelle? Okay, here's a question. Do you have the students balance the register at the end of the day?
Oh, yes. Every week, 2 students are receptionists. So they're in charge of making the appointments, putting the appointments in the computer, and then they're in charge of the money for that day. So they have to open the drawer and close the drawer, make the deposit, send it up to our business office from start to finish.
Thank you. Any other questions for Michelle? Melissa, it looks like you have your hand raised. I'm not sure if that's from earlier. I'll unmute you. Did you have a question, Melissa?
No, I think that might have been from earlier. I'm sorry.
Okay, I apologize. No problem. I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss you. Okay. Great. Well, thanks again, Michelle. Appreciate it that you're willing to share that with us.
You're welcome.
All right. And then we also had an example from Bonnie Skinner from Jeff Tech, and let's give her audio a try. Bonnie, do you want to test out your audio? Are you on the phone with us?
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, good.
All right, and let me just identify, you had sent the Governor's Institute lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So if you could just tell us a little bit about this example and when you've used it, and this is, looks like it's in a, oops, I'm sorry, if you could speak up just a little bit.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you could speak up just a little bit, please.
Okay. Our school is comprehensive. So this was done actually several years ago at the Governor's Institute. Myself, our math instructor, and a learning and sport instructor had gone, and we were to do one of these 7 elements to find a lesson and to be able to work on it. So with the 3 of us working on it together, this is what we had come up with. And this is on the different facial shapes, and there's so much math involved with analyzing facial shapes. We started it out with the criteria for an oval facial shape, where the students have to do measure and estimation with the 3 equal, for the horizontal zones of the face, and then to see if the face is 3/4 as wide as what it is long, and then again, if it's oval, it would have the distance of 5, eye spans across. So what we originally had done with one of these lessons, we had taken the students, had them pull their hair, back away from their face, and we took photographs of them. Then we took their pictures and had them printed on transparencies. Of course, this was before we had Elmos and projectors, so we had to use the overhead. And we had the overhead up, and we would have it and kind of walk through it as a group. And then using, clear transparencies, we would actually draw the horizontal lines, to measure the 3 zones of the face. First of all, we would have them, look at it and just do an estimation. Well, then once you would do this and measure it and put the lines on, then they could actually get their rulers out and measure it and compare what their original estimation was. which was kind of nice, for them to be able to, because we all know with cosmetologists what we say is an inch and what really is an inch isn't always the same. So this, really came true for a good experience for them for that, to be able to actually measure it. There's different, things on here that we did have them do. The math instructor really identified the math terminology. We had an example even with the line of symmetry on the face, where we had the y-axis and measured that one. And then we did the example with the ratio that the ideal oval facial shape would be 3/4 as wide as it is long. So the students could actually measure that and then compare it to see, if it met that criteria. It has listed here, we went through each of the elements for it. We also had created like a little worksheet type thing, at the end to do that they would work through. And it would have like, you would have to analyze a person's face if they had an oval facial shape, if it met the criteria, for each of the things for that. Then that's how they would, what we used part of it for the evaluation.
That's great. Thanks. I'm just sort of scrolling through here so everyone can see the full extent of this. So,
our learning and sport instructor, she did an awesome job too, with explaining, some of the problems, that we came into. We took a strip when we measured the y-axis, measured that, and then cut a piece of paper to that length, and then had the students fold it in half and then fold it in half again, so it was in the quarters. And then she had them tear off, 1/4 to be able to have, a little bit more simplified version to do the 3/4, width compared to the length, which I thought that was kind of, a nice, an easier thing for them to understand, an easier visual.
Right, and I like that you had different approaches to solve the same question as well. That's really creative.
And then, at the time they were using the coach books, so they used that. We always use the Milady for the math. So then we had different examples, to be able to, put comparatively to, the same types of problems.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks, Bonnie, for sharing that with us. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Bonnie or related to this example that she shared with us? If so, please raise your hand or type it into the question box. Just give a second for that. I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and continue on. But again, we appreciate your help in sharing that, Bonnie, and also Michelle for the bell ringers that are the Minute Math examples that you shared with us today. Kathleen, do you have any thoughts or comments on the examples and how they reflect what you were speaking about earlier?
Am I back with you?
You are. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just think they were both really neat, and they're coming at, I think, different issues when you talk about the Common Core State Standards for Math, which is our target, have really defined our targets with the anchors and the alignment that the state is doing with those. And so, like, for example, Michelle's examples of the Minute Math, those get at this idea of what I call and what the Common Core authors call procedural fluency. So the idea of what math skills cosmetologists need to be fluent in. So that, as she was saying, if you're at Walmart and their system crashes, can you rely on your own fluency? It's the kind of skills, the math skills that you want your students to be able to do and be able to do with, accuracy and some timeliness, boom, 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 boom. So I think that's neat to build those into the Minute Math kind of ways to approach it. And then so that jumped out at me as like, oh, that's a great way to really build procedural fluency. And the use, like you said, of manipulatives, the real money, is really fun. It's neat. I mean, it makes it really authentic. And then Bonnie's example, which obviously was written in alignment with the 7 elements, because I know I'm familiar with the Governor's Institute work, and that's what their charge was. And that's a great example. And notice that it really, when you start to pay attention to those 7 elements, you get a little deeper. It may not be, we may not naturally stop and plan to include, for example, the bridging of the terminology, like the idea of showing the y-axis, and the line of symmetry. It may not use that terminology normally, but it really helps students to make the transition. I was thinking about that too. I was thinking, how neat when Bonnie said her colleague had set up this idea of the y-axis. Think about this. If you had an example where you're always reiterating for your students the 0, the 45, the 90, 180, correct me, I might not be accurate with that, but I think those are sometimes references to different hair cutting angles of how you hold the hair straight down and then out of the 45. You think about if you ask students what they would do to graph that on a coordinate plane, just the first quadrant, like they set up a y and an x-axis and say, where's the 45-degree cut? Like, what does that look like visually, graphically, mathematically? It'd be interesting to see them make that transition. So that's what we're talking about, is those opportunities to really bridge between the terminology, but also bridge between how the math looks and how it looks in the world of cosmetology and nail and esthetician, et cetera. So I thought those were both great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I did have, if I may, I wanted to also, may I kind of just share a little bit of an infomercial for the coming attraction?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay. So do I have, is it your screen or my screen?
I can turn it back to you.
Okay. If I may, and I'll be very, try to be very succinct.
Yep. And just so folks,
not like, oh, please don't have her chat.
No, not at all. Just so folks know, the next time that we'll be talking about math and CTE again will be at our March webinar. So this is, I think Kathleen's going to give you a little bit of a preview or a flavor of what might be to come in March.
Yeah. So if I may, I wanted to pull up this example. I'll see if I can find it. But if I may, so we're charged at this point with the idea of really meeting the Common Core. And folks may say, well, how is that different? And the state is in the middle and continuing to work on alignment of that with the, the anchor assessments and so on and so forth. So that's, we're right on the edge of having that all come into play. The standards have just been finalized, I believe, this past April for the state. But I wanted to just, if I can, just plant a few seeds so that this crew, your PLC group, can really start becoming the kind of stepping out front with this work. The Common Core for math is really about trying to strike a balance for students so that we're not always just looking at procedural fluency. We're not always looking at just practicing skills, for example. It's not that that's not critical. It is. Like, for example, we want students to be able to calculate percentages, and we want them to do that without a lot of trouble. But we also want them to be involved in critical thinking. So some of the examples early on were perfect for that. The idea of giving them a scenario and saying, figure out a schedule that you can work all these people in, overlapping, cuts and colors and so on and so forth. That's the idea of building really rich scenarios. So, and also the other move, and I know that the students that we currently have in our system haven't been through their previous educational years with the Common Core in place, but we're hopeful that now that they're going to be entering into the pipeline, they will, is that the focus is going much deeper instead of, from mile wide. They found that in the United States, in terms of mathematically, we math teachers from, grades K on the way all throughout, were really charged to do a lot. They were charged to cover a lot, so it was not about discovering, it was about covering, which I think is a nice way to think about it. So what that means for us, for CTE folks, is that it's about, down at that corner there, the application. CTE teachers are sitting in a prime position for the Common Core State Standards for Math because they want this idea of a balanced approach. They want students to be able to not only understand the deep concepts underlying the math and the procedures, but be able to apply it to new situations. So I am going to be rallying cosmetology teachers to really think about contextual, rich examples. Can we develop those rich tasks, those problem-solving tasks that really ask students to do that, and get away from us directing it by, kind of giving them all the steps up front, like now you need to divide, now you need to multiply. students have come to expect that from their teachers, from us. They look to you like, I don't know what to do, I'm going to wait until you tell me what to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't help to build the persistence in them. I wanted to share this example that came from a conversation of work between a cosmetology teacher in New York State and one of her mathematics colleagues. Because we need to look at these habits of mind. There are 8 math practices in the Common Core State Standards that look at what do we expect a mathematical expert, what do we want a student who's a mathematical expert to be demonstrating? And here are some of them. We want them to solve problems, use appropriate tools, which cosmetologists you want them to do. You want them to persevere. You want them to be precise in their work. You want them to be precise in their planning, in their pricing, in how they handle business plans. And I thought this was an interesting example. So this goes along with the participant, forgive me if I couldn't keep track, of who said, oh, I have my students do a business plan and a salon plan. Awesome. This teacher also did that. And what happened once she talked with the math teacher about the Common Core, about how can I kind of take this to the next level, this is what they came up with. And I have their whole conversation, which we can post if it's helpful at all. But it's how do you take the exercise, the project of creating a business plan or a salon plan and taking it to the next level. The bold type, they might be hard to see, but the bold type are 4 of the 8 math practices that are very, very evident in this work. So one of them is about persevere and making sense of problems. And this teacher had the students include a scale drawing, a salon layout. How would you design your salon? They had to do research. They had to physically lay it out, create a scale drawing, a blueprint, for example. So that's making sense. That's persevering. That's also number 4, modeling. There's also another one, this idea of critiquing the reasoning of others. Cosmetologists and cosmetology teachers are really good at this in terms of like pairing students up to do some peer critique of their work. This can also play a role in their mathematics thinking. So I want to encourage you to think about that, like taking the math minute problems, but having them get together in pairs or threes, and having them justify their thinking and see who had the best approach or just a different approach. And then this idea of using appropriate tools strategically. So all those thoughts or conversations with this math teacher to say, hey, you have them using possible spreadsheets, they can use calculators, they have to use drawing instruments when they're doing this kind of thing. So what's coming around the bend is for us to look at our CTE projects that involve math and trying to look at including or emphasizing these math thinking, these supporting math thinking, these math habits. Here's an extension, the extension that I thought was very interesting for this project with these 2 teachers is that the math teacher asked the cosmetology teacher if they would include the idea of, they wanted to get into algebra. And so they thought they could by creating or proposing an authentic loan application. So that they're going to do their business plan, but then they needed to figure out how it was going to be profitable and try to prove that. And that starts to become algebraic. And so I had an example of like fixed costs and variable costs. And you can graph that and you can look at the intersection and say, ooh, if I have a loan payment, but I bring this much into my salon every month, how does that look? And it may not be the math that you normally think about going toward, but the Common Core is really starting to demand that of us, to really look at that. And I believe that students can be asked to conquer that even if they're not the best at their skills. I think it's important that we don't keep that from them even though they may have a rough time with some of the basics, because oftentimes what happens is we practice the basics and they never get to put themselves into a challenge. So our job is to write the challenge so that they can have an entry point, they can think about getting in there and trying to figure it out. And this last slide is just a visual that I like to leave people with about our goal with the Common Core State Standards, and we're going to work on this in the next session, is really about trying to stop GPSing students. So I'd like to see what people think I mean by that, but we have got to stop GPSing students through their math thinking. Jennifer, thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Does anyone have a thought about that or any other comments or questions related to the information that Kathleen has shared with us or other discussions this afternoon? I see, looks like Christine Franklin has her hand up. I'm going to unmute your microphone. Christine, did you have a question or a comment to share? Go ahead, please, if you do.
No, it was an accident.
Okay, no worries. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter back to myself just so that I can share with you all some examples and samples of resources that you might consider taking a look at. The first is the content that's available on the SAS community page for our group, and we looked at some of the math resources today. As I mentioned, there are quite a few more up there, and we welcome you to share additional ones that you have. They don't need to be in any particular format. They can be Word documents, PowerPoints, however you have them. Our goal right now is really just to build out the list and the types of resources that are up there. So I encourage you to take a look at those, and if you have items to share, please send them to me. You can send it to our PAPLC@meterconsulting.com website, and we'll get those posted. Another interesting booklet that I came across this afternoon as I was poking around the internet a little bit is this booklet produced by the Montana Career Resource Network called Who Needs Math? And it includes a variety of interviews with different tradespeople and different people from different types of businesses, asking them what they do and how they use problem solving and math in their jobs. And there is a page in there for cosmetologists. So you might consider taking a look at this, see if it's something you could use in your classroom. Could also be an opportunity to bring in some literacy activities as well. So if that is of interest, please feel free to check that out. And also just a comment, all of the slides that we're showing you today, both the ones that I have as well as Kathleen's, we will be posting them to the SAS website, so those will be available to you. We try to get those up within a day or two of our webinars, so hopefully by the end of this week we'll have those up there. A couple other websites you might want to take a look at with some math activities, and again, we'd like to keep building on this list. We'll be collecting ideas from you and other folks within the field and posting those to the SAS site. So please feel free to keep sharing those. The more the merrier. So just a couple minutes to talk about next steps. Our next webinar will be coming up after the new year, January 22nd from 9:30 to 11 o'clock. And just a reminder that each of our webinars has a separate website address that you'll need to use to register. Unfortunately, that's a limitation of our system that we use, that we have a different website address for each one, but we do share those with you in our emails and also in the newsletter, as well as on the SAS website. So please be on the lookout for information from us related to that upcoming webinar. And along those lines, if you haven't yet created a SAS account and joined the PLC community for our Cosmetology PLC, we encourage you to do that. There's great information available on our community page as well as throughout the SAS site. So if you have the opportunity to look around there, you might find something else that's of use. And if you do, please let us know so that we can share it with the group. And secondly, if you are interested in pursuing Act 48 credits, please be sure to complete and submit a webinar response form. I will be sending that form, a blank form, out to you via email, and so if you can complete that and return it to our email address, which is shown on the screen there, by December 11th, next Tuesday, that would be great. We'll keep track of those. So that was the those were the sort of housekeeping items. We'll just take a minute to see if anyone has any questions or comments, any other thoughts that they'd like to share with us this afternoon. So please raise your hand or type us a note into the question box. Kathleen, did you have any closing thoughts or comments that you wanted to add?
Just thank you so much for inviting me to listen in and hear what's up in the world of our cosmetology professionals out there. I'm very excited about their examples and looking forward to seeing how we progress. Thank you.
Great, and thank you for joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge and information with us. We really appreciate it. So, well, that concludes our session for today. Thank you all for participating. Please be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us. And if we don't hear back from you between now and the new year, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. And we'll look forward to meeting with you then. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon.